Gerald, Ernat, welcome to the American Glutton podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm happy to chat today and, kind of go over whatever we want to talk about.
Yeah, I like your stuff online. It always has there's some resonance of truth in it, and I get something out of it. But I want to say, like, you are a dietitian for the U.S. military.
Correct. Yes.
What does that mean?
Yeah. I work with a group of military members as part of a fitness program that is nationwide. So I work alongside strength coaches, athletic trainers, physical therapists, occupational therapists, and then a couple other kind of niche uh, professionals to help soldiers be healthier, be stronger, and just improve their overall quality of life.
So, like, my childhood fantasy was always that, the military were just these badasses. And if you showed up like at all out of shape, the military whipped you into shape. And I fully did visualize some secret group that was like, here's how we're going to get them to be in the best shape. And that's you. You're part of that.
Yeah, it's really really rewarding helping out these athletes, and just like anyone, there's just like any population, there's definite high achievers and then the not so high achievers too. So it's a really rewarding position, and we definitely have some ass kickers to help that we help.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really cool. I think, some of that training seems so god awful to me. But like my picture of any like the standard, like the minimum requirement, right? We're not talking about buds or whatever the Delta guys do or something like that. But like the
Yeah.
minimum requirement is you got to be able to carry a heavy load over a long distance. Like that's what everybody's going through, right?
Yeah, pretty much, with their like fitness testing, it's called the ACFT, the Army Combat Fitness Testing. That's the type of testing that I'm associated with. And so they have to be really well rounded as an athlete. They have to be strong. There's a deadlift, there's a trap bar deadlift component to it. There is a plank, there is a 2 mile run, there is a kind of a complex called the sprint drag carry, where you have to sprint down and back, you have to drag a weighted sled, and then you have to carry some kettlebells like a fireman carry. So there's you have to be really really well rounded. There's push-ups in there too. So there's different components of fitness that they like to focus on.
Well, I'm glad it's not just like, let's batter these guys up with physical activity and see how they do. You know what I mean? I'm glad there's somebody back there who's going like, let's design this.
Yeah, the military is really evolving, and I think they're definitely getting smarter on the training methodologies on how to be overall healthy and not just, dig these people into the ground. Because previously, like back in the day, it was, you run, you do push-ups and sit-ups until you're blue in the face, and that's it. And that's where we saw, well, people see a lot of like overuse injuries, just running so much. And a lot of times when in doubt in the military, the leaders just say, we're going on a 5 mile run.
Right.
And a lot of times people aren't ready for that.
Yeah, I can't imagine a 5 mile run. I couldn't do a 5 mile run. I mean, I'm just a terrible runner. I probably would not cut it in the military at any point in my life. And I know I looked into this too. So I know that there are exceptions, like flat feet don't just automatically get you out of potential service. There's a degree of flat feet, but I have severe flat feet. I have paddles for feet.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely exceptions to those kind of arbitrary rules for sure. But when working with soldiers, like we work around those issues and medical problems. So a lot of times if soldiers are if they have like a knee injury, they have a foot injury or something like that, there are alternate events and fitness tests that they can do to stay within the standards.
Yeah.
But then also that's where we come into play is like, hey, where's the injury recovery from nutrition, the rehab from physical therapy and occupational therapy, and then the strength and conditioning to work around those injuries and still allow for them to do their job and be healthy and in shape.
Yeah. Um, I, for the longest time, have thought of America as being the kind of torchbearer for obesity in the world. And I actually, in looking into it recently, found we're not number one. We're I don't even know that we're the top 10. I think maybe we are, but we're not
Oh,
number
wow.
one. We're not the top three. Strangely enough, there are these islands that have, they're a far smaller populations, but they have a higher rate of obesity than we do. Um, but as far as America goes, I can't talk to those islands because I have no data about them, and I'd never lived in any of these places, so I have no idea what's going on there. But as far as
Yeah.
America is concerned, what do you think some of the major contributing issues are to this crisis? We're talking a lot about fitness, which I think is real interesting, but I do think of I'm sure a big part of the obesity issue in America is that we're moving less, but I think it probably is mostly how we're eating.
Yeah, I think it's a healthy balance of both of those. If you have a lower socioeconomic status, you're kind of struggling when it comes to finances. A lot of times in my experience and kind of in the real world, if a single mom of four or something has to provide for their family and get a quick bite to eat, it's tough to, make a really well balanced, nutritious meal on $20 for a full family.
Right.
So what do they resort to? They resort to going through McDonald's or X fast food chain and getting their money's worth. And what's associated with those foods is they're hyper palatable, so they're really really tasty, but they're very very calorie dense too. So it's very much easier to overconsume those types of foods. Now, it's not to say that they're bad by any means, right? But it's just from a nutrient calorie composition, there's definite differences between each.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm awash with ideas of like, like you said, they're not bad, right? I don't want to moralize anything. But if we take a point of view that obesity is a negative, and the rate of obesity in America is a negative, then it becomes hard for me in that context to not think of certain things as good or bad. And I know I also think
Sure.
of like the dose makes the poison. And so like there's nothing wrong with a Big Mac, right? Like
Yes.
I look at a Big Mac and I'm not going, you're evil. But when I think about, 100 trillion served or whatever the motto is, when I was a kid, it was 65 million and then it was billions. And I don't know
Yeah.
what it is now. It's gotta be way up there. I don't even know if they
Sure.
advertise that anymore. But like a billion Big Macs. Okay. Do we need a billion Big Macs? That's that's a lot of Big Macs. That might be bad. Uh do you I was asked recently, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I was asked recently if I was hopeful that this situation could reverse itself. Are you?
As far as obesity goes,
Yeah.
you know, that's a really great question. I feel like I'm kind of on the fence with that too. I'm a little skeptical about like it completely reversing because I
Yeah.
think it'll always be a problem, especially with, how we are trending as a society as far as like commodity foods. We're all about convenience when it comes to food, but then also transportation too. And that's a huge factor. Like I had a previous coach in the past where he lived in the UK and he walked everywhere. So it was much, much easier to maintain his body composition, his weight, or lose weight if that was his goal, as opposed to someone like myself where not everything is within walking distance to me. So I have to travel 20 minutes to work every morning. And if you work a desk job like myself and like a lot of people in the world, it's really tough to get in a good amount of activity throughout the day, especially if you're strapped to your desk for 8 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I'm not super optimistic about that. You know,
Yeah.
I then thought there is also the aspect where I go like, what happens if, you know, let's say these new peptides that are super appetite suppressing, right?
Yes.
And they're not like the stuff they had when I was a kid, which was basically speed. You want to lessen
Yeah.
your appetite, we're going to jack you up on speed. So these
Yeah.
things seem at this point with the amount of people that have taken them for diabetes, they seem okay. Like you don't have people dying of strokes from this stuff. Um, and if they explode in the way I suspect they will for weight, then could there be the chain reaction where, you know, suddenly we're putting huge swaths of these fast food establishments out of business simply because people are less hungry?
Yeah, that's a really interesting like concept. Thinking about that is, in a perfect world, that sounds great. And by all means, I'm not trying to put businesses out of
No,
commission by any
right,
means, but it's they have a time and a place, just like any other tool in your diet toolbox. And they have been shown to be helpful, especially when you stack on healthy diet and lifestyle behavior changes too. So just with anything, I've had experience with people that are taking like semaglutide and they aren't losing an ounce of weight, and that's because they're not focused on the big picture stuff, which is, your nutrition and your activity throughout the day. So I've worked with I worked at a bariatric weight loss clinic for a period of time, and a lot of these individuals just thought that, hey, I'm going to get this surgery and all my problems are going to be solved. And then they get the surgery, and the time that we worked with each other before surgery to prep them for it and say, hey, this is a lot of changes that you're going to need to make to even after surgery to maintain this weight loss. And they've gone through the surgery, they haven't made any changes, and then a year later they're back to their regular body weight, their obese body weight, and they're back to square one.
right.
So, and the root of it all is going to be those behavior changes down to its core, pretty much.
Yeah, I talked to a guy over the weekend who I hadn't seen in a couple of years, and I saw him and he had lost a bunch of weight, and I was like, "Oh my God, you look great." And he said, "I got on Ozempic." And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, you look great." And he said, "Yeah, but it stopped working." So he was at whatever the max dose is, and he's
Mm-hmm.
not, and so he was now in a place where he was like, "Now I have to actually diet." And
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that it will actually make dieting more conducive to his life. You know, that's a
Mm-hmm.
possibility. So that's there. But yeah, I think what you're saying is like, I think first of all, you know, the people who are trying to lose 20, 30, 40 pounds and they're using this, if they're just going on and off of it, I think we will see some really bad outcomes down the road in a couple of years. You know, we'll see body
Yeah.
fat percentage higher simply because if you do it and you're not hungry and you're not changing anything and you're not increasing
Mm-hmm.
protein and you're not doing any resistance training and you're just kind of like almost fasting that 40 pounds off, you'll lose some lean tissue. And then when you put the 40 pounds back on, you likely won't put that lean tissue back on, you know, and so that's
Yeah.
concerning. But like,
Absolutely. Especially if you're, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. No, please.
I was just gonna say, especially if you're not like, resistance training or anything, you're not gonna put on good weight, right? And it's not gonna be the body weight, that uptick in body weight that we want, which is muscle mass, which is, that longevity hack, so to speak, right?
Right.
It's only going to help you in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird it's a weird amazing time. I as a kid can remember dreaming of like, why don't they just have a pill? Why don't they just have some medicine
Yes.
that will solve this for me? And it seems like from all appearances, this is what they've got. Like the thing I dreamt of when I was a kid. We'll see. Like, for me,
Mhm.
the jury's still out to some degree, but it does seem like that miracle thing. Now, with anything, you could use it wisely or you could use it in a dumb way, or. And
For
so,
sure.
and also like whatever my idealism I had doesn't have to be everybody's ideal. If you're just a gal who's like, I don't care about anything you just said, I want to take the 40 pounds off, I want to live my life, I want to make zero changes, and I'm happy to do this
Mhm.
twice a year for a month or two. Okay, fair.
Yeah, I mean, to each their own, right? Um, but to kind of go off of what you previously said, I definitely know kind of your story, and it's pretty freaking awesome on how far that you've come in your own, nutrition and fitness journey too. And we have a lot of similarities in that regard too, because I myself thought, oh, well, I struggle with my weight. And I thought the same thing. I was like, if only there was a pill, if only there was this medication or something, and it would solve all my problems. And, there was even a point in time where I thought it was kind of hopeless and I wasn't going to make those changes. And I was like, well, down the road, maybe I can just get weight loss surgery then, and that'll solve all my problems. And,
Yeah.
you know, come to find out that that's not really how it works if you want sustainable weight loss changes too. So,
No, totally.
um,
Um, the pill and the weight loss surgery and any of these options too, and any diet I really did that where the focus was I need to lose X amount of weight, where that is the only criteria, the only goal. That's I'm narrowly looking at life and going like the only real thing that matters is this weight loss.
mm,
There are so many pitfalls to that. Um, and I've been trying to talk about it a little bit on social media. I don't know that I'm saying it coherently enough, but it's the same thing with like when I used to hear lifestyle change, that word, like, or those words, lifestyle change, it made my skin crawl. It irritated me. And
mm,
once I had actually done lifestyle change, I was like, oh, I get it now. But it really required me doing it to understand it, to get what those
mm,
people were talking about, and to go like, oh my God, they were right. That's what it takes. It takes lifestyle change, you know. Um, but we're in America where like we have pretty much everything we want and we have it immediately. And like
yeah.
there's nothing fun about lifestyle change. It's not easy and it's not
Mm-hmm.
fast, and and if you are still coming from the perspective that you all you need to do is lose this weight to have this problem solved, it's very difficult to see another perspective, um that like maybe experiencing weight loss as a byproduct rather than the sole goal might make it more lasting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why a lot of times when I work with individuals, whether in my primary job or like in the online space, it's one quote that I find myself saying constantly is if we focus on the food and the exercise, we focus on those changes, the body composition changes are just going to follow. And it's almost like that side effect, right?
Yeah.
And we're not focused on the outcome, then we're focused on those steps to get to that outcome.
I wonder if, like, to your point, do you have these guys stay away from scales and measurements and even thinking about that at all? Is that part of it for some people?
In specific scenarios, I won't have people monitor their body weight regularly. But most of the cases, if I'm not seeing any red flags when it comes to like relationships with food, or if they have a really skewed relationship with food, I just focus on some dietary patterns right off the bat. But in people that maybe are a little bit more advanced, they have none of those red flags showing. I am all for like, hey, why don't we monitor our body weight on a regular basis? Now, does it have to be every single day? No, but a few times a week, 3, 4, 5 times a week, and taking more of an average of that, that is one of the most effective tools of self-monitoring. And I don't know about you, but like in my experience and personal and professional, when I start noticing my body weight kind of creep up in a certain area, I'm like, okay, time to kind of dial it down a little bit. I need to kind of
100%.
focus on those actionable steps then. So from a research perspective, that self-monitoring is one of the most effective things to for weight management, and that goes to a variety of levels too. It doesn't have to necessarily be calorie or macro tracking. It could be tracking your body weight. It could be, hey, I'm gonna focus on a certain set amount of meals on a day. I'm a 4 meals a day kind of person. That's just what works for me. And I know, hey, this is kind of my form of self-monitoring. I'm gonna have these 4 meals, and then I can kind of stack on top of that. Well, what are the composition of those meals and go from there.
Yeah, no, listen, today I'll sometimes weigh myself twice a day. Like I'm all
Yeah.
about the scale. But I'm thinking about like it took me damn near 15 years to get to a place where I was being radically honest with myself. And for those 15 years, my sole focus was a number. And and I believed that if I got to that number, I was done. And so that was an unhealthy relationship with the scale, you know. And I'm not even
Mhm.
saying, I'm not going to bullshit you, because as a sober person I also find honesty to be difficult. It's something I have to actually work at. And so I was thoroughly capable of lying to myself, and by default lying to everybody around me, almost constantly without even trying, right? And so I have to actually try, like, what is the most honest I can be with myself? My relationship with the scale today sucks. I'm never happy with it. Unless it's
Mhm.
going down. If it's going down, but I recognize that as irrational. And so now I get on the scale, I feel that disappointment, and I go like, okay, what number would have made me feel good? Okay, why why would that be correct? Oh, it's not correct. The number there is correct. I haven't done it.
Mhm.
Like, if I'm being completely, I have to have this fucking conversation like I'm a schizophrenic in my head,
Yeah.
and I get through it. Um, but I'm more thinking about like the 15 years I spent chasing a number. And what would happen is I'd get to the
Mhm.
number, and then I'd be like, okay, whatever, I'm done with the diet. And I'd maybe weigh in a couple more times, and then I'd just stop and I wouldn't weigh in until I'd gain
Yeah.
40, 50 pounds. Getting back on the scale the
Yeah.
next time would be devastating. And so, like, when you were talking about initially just focusing on the food and the exercise, I'm literally thinking like, if somebody had convinced me in the beginning, we're not trying to lose weight right now. All we're trying to do is switch out these habits, these relationships. Like, if you are
Mhm.
eating fast food 3 times a day, let's get it down to two and then think about one down the road, right? So like, it would have been very hard for me to do that, because I wasn't ever for many years thinking about changing my life. I was thinking about just this weight loss. That was the only component to it. Whereas
Mhm.
when I think about my life today, I don't eat fast food. I just don't. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
maybe once a year, and that's because my wife says she discovered something called Freddy's steak burgers, and like,
Yeah.
it's insane. You have to eat this, and it's like, really? Do I really? And she's like,
Mhm.
yes, you have to. And so I find myself eating a Freddy's steak burger, and of
Yeah.
course, it's been sitting in a bag for an hour and it's cold, and I'm like, this sucks, and I'm not so excited. But I imagine if you got it piping hot, it would be amazing. But like, that's, um what do you think of that? Do you think that that is useful? I also don't think everybody's the same as me. I don't think everybody's lying and an addict and a, just dirtbag like I am.
No, I agree. I think it's always going to be a work in progress too, like you mentioned. I've struggled with that personally too, is like, hey, when I get here, I've made it kind of situation. But in your career and your nutrition and your fitness goals and really anything, if you want to be successful in it, you got to just continue to, hone that skill, right? And I have a lot of conversations with people when it comes to their nutrition, and I say this isn't like a get skinny quick program that's going to set you up for failure in the long run. And I don't want to really worry about the next 3 months. I want to worry about the next 30 years
Right.
of your life. And so a lot of times in my primary job working with soldiers, we have a program for people that exceed their current weight or body composition like metrics. There's some standards within the military that soldiers have to abide by. And so my role is to help these individuals that are struggling with their weight get to a better body composition, and they have a certain time frame to get off of this program. But a lot of the conversations that I had with them is, hey, this isn't a get off the program quick scheme because anybody can do that. And if they get back on that program within a certain time frame, so they do it like they get on the program twice within like a year or so, they get kicked out of the military. They
Oh,
get
wow.
fired essentially. So that's where I am trying to break that mold of, hey, we're not going to extreme diet and severely restrict ourselves and make our weight requirements and make our body composition standards only to blow back up after a month. And then you get that taping or that measure again, and then you set yourself up for failure.
Yeah. Is it easy to, is it, I'm just, I don't really know a whole lot about how the military operates on the day to day, but like in my mind, and I guess this is not true because there's like people who live in houses and are in the military and they go home and they go to the grocery store and stuff, right? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking like everybody's going to the mess hall 3 times a day to eat. That is it easy to eat well, or is the food good? Is it fast? Are they serving them cheeseburgers all day long?
Yeah, there's a healthy mix of both, like two populations basically. There's one where it's essentially the soldiers are in the barracks, which is basically like college dorm rooms, and they don't a lot of times they don't have access to like a fully fledged kitchen, but most of them do. And so they can make food and they can make meals and prepare them in kind of that dorm room setting. Uh, and then there's also another population where they live in an actual like house, right? And
Right.
so some people commute to work, they live off of a military base or they live on base, but in a regular home then. And so there are dining facilities on the bases, and they have a wide variety of foods that are nutritious. They also provide some more fun foods, right? So
Right.
sometimes they have a short line where it's a burger and french fries or a hot dog or you name it, right? But there are so many other nutritious options at the dining facilities, and there are some regulatory rules and laws that need to be met
Like
to provide
they have
nutritious
to
food.
provide vegetables. Is it like something like
Yeah,
that?
there's a bunch of different like regulations saying, hey, you need to be serving at least so many vegetables on the salad bar. You need to be serving so many fruits at each, service. You need to provide so many different types of drink options for them. So there's a lot of standards in place. And I mean, I've eaten at these dining facilities and you can make a wonderful, well-balanced, nutritious plate and that still aligns with your goals. And so those are the conversations that I have with soldiers. If they only have access to the dining facilities, I will take them through and say, okay, take me through what you're doing in the dining facility, and then we'll focus on portions and amounts, and the list goes on.
Right.
And then there's the other type of soldier that will, buy their own food and grocery shop, and they make the majority of their meals at home, or their significant other or their partner is making them for them. So that's a kind of another conversation that I have is, okay, well, what are we doing at home? How is your partner preparing these meals? Are you the main maker of those meals? And so those are the types of conversations that we have. And so there, it's a good,
It's a
healthy mix
mix.
of fast food, well, not really fast food, but like dining facility type, like mess halls, and then people that have more control of their nutrition too.
Yeah, I will say for me, I find it far easier to, and I'm going to use language that I don't really like, to eat good or clean, right? Which I think is BS. Um, when I'm completely responsible for it, when I'm going to the grocery store, choosing what I'm cooking, and then cooking it for myself. I find it very hard because I travel quite a bit for work to be
Yeah.
in another place, and especially if I'm there for like 3 days and I'm not in an apartment, I'm in a hotel, and it's like,
Mhm.
so now I'm not cooking, right? So now I'm utterly subjected to somebody else and not knowing, is this cooked in olive oil or butter? That makes a difference. I want a little bit more
Yeah.
omega 3s than I'd prefer the olive oil. Um, and then suddenly also you're looking at a menu, and stuff is jumping off the page to my mind and saying, eat me.
Hmm.
And the steamed fish is never that. I have to
No.
convince, that's a conversation. It's one of these ridiculous conversations I have to have with myself, asking for sauce on the side. And God forbid I forget to do any of those steps. And then I get the thing, and it's like, how hard would it be to ask them to take it back and remake? It's too hard, and I'm embarrassed to be like
Yeah.
caring about it. And so I'm then eating sauce. Um, so I imagine going to a mess hall. Like, I love hot dogs. Hot dogs are delicious. French fries are
Yeah.
delicious. It's hard to go and choose the salad bar when you've got
Hmm.
the option of a delicious hot dog and French fries.
Yeah. And I do get some people that would say like, "Hey, this stuff is just right here. It's tasty. I'm gonna opt for that." And I always just try and stress like, "Hey, there's got to be that healthy balance, right? Not every one of your meals should be focused on that, especially if you have weight loss or even weight management goals in mind. But there needs to be some compromise. It goes with anything in life, right? Where I use the analogy with not too long ago with a group of individuals, and I said, someone said, "Well, what if you don't like any vegetables?" Or what if I? Well, they said, what if I won't eat? If I can't eat any vegetables?" And I said, can you not eat vegetables or will you not eat vegetables?
Right.
And so I got a couple Snickers from that one, but it's true. It's one of those things where, hey, there's plenty of options out there. If you hate broccoli for whatever reason, you don't need to just choke down broccoli to be healthy. There's 5,000 other vegetables that can fill you up, give you plenty of nutrition, and you can prioritize your health. So again, it the analogy what I was going to say is I don't always like eating vegetables, just like I don't always like paying my bills. But if I want to keep a roof over my head, I got to pay my bills. And so if I want to make sure I'm getting in all the vitamins and minerals and nutrients and live a healthy life, I got to get in some vegetables every day.
Yeah, vegetables are for sure tricky because, like, for me to make a vegetable like super enjoyable requires a bunch of oil or
Mm-hmm.
fat, and then I can get into it.
Yeah,
On its own, it's not fun. Like, a steak with a little salt is fun. There's nothing fun about broccoli and salt for me. I'm sure there's some
sure.
vegans out there that love broccoli. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
but I will say that, like, I feel pretty crummy when my fiber levels drop out the floor and I'm not forcing myself to eat vegetables. And so, like, that's why I eat them, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another thing that I recommend all the time is like use spices. Don't be afraid of them. They're calorie free. Make them tasty. Uh, Adding a little bit of oil isn't gonna kill you either.
Right.
So if you want to saute stuff, by all means, go for it. And salt, pepper, you name it, Cajun seasoning. The the world's your
Yes,
oyster.
they can be delicious. Yes, I'm not saying like
Yeah,
in any shape, like the little kid, no matter what you put, if it's green, they're just making a face. That's not me,
yeah,
but
yeah.
like, sometimes. I want a quarter cup of olive oil on my, four
Uh-huh.
ounces of
Yeah.
broccoli. You know what I mean? I want it to be equal parts,
Yeah,
which
I
is not.
totally understand. Yeah, there's a nice balance.
Yeah, for sure. And then they have those sprays where it's like, 0 calories for a quarter second spray. And you can get extra virgin olive oil spray or
Yeah.
coconut oil or avocado oil or any of that stuff. And I'm like, my
Yeah.
instinct is just to hit it 300 times for a quarter second. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah,
Ah,
totally understand, and kind of finding that loophole then to get a little bit more fats and a little bit more flavor into your veggies.
yeah, exactly. What do you think of the kind of battle? I guess it's not really a battle. I mean, and this probably comes down to like how I program my algorithm, and I probably relate more to carnivores because I like meat more than vegetables. But
Hmm.
I'm not such a fan of like the carnivore diet. Um, but I don't remember ever. I mean, I can recall um being a kid and the advent of Atkins happening and being put on Atkins, but that wasn't like meat only. Um,
Hmm.
so the meat only movement seems fairly new to me. I don't know of any instance of advocating for meat only historically, or certainly since like fad dieting has taken over, but it seems new. What do you think of meat only?
I'm really not a big fan. I'm a meat eater. I grew up on a farm. My father and my family raised beef cattle, so I'm no stranger to that. But there are certain nutrients and vitamins and minerals and antioxidants that you can't get through only meat. And so fiber being one of them, like you mentioned before, fiber is one of the most influential things when it comes to our overall health. And there's research supporting that for every 10 grams of fiber that we take in a day, we reduce our risk of all cause mortality by 10%. And
Huh.
so that alone makes me want to advocate for fruits and vegetables and fibrous grains in a everyday life. Um, so yeah, that's the big one for me is it doesn't have to be so extreme to lose weight or manage your health. And you're most likely causing more harm than good by going on an only steak diet.
Right. Yeah.
And now for a
Yeah.
period of time, cool, right? Like a lot of people get motivated by doing a certain type of diet for a shorter duration of time. And I'm not completely opposed to it, but if you're going for prolonged periods of time without specific nutrients that are health promoting, that's where I find a lot of issues are going to arise from it.
Yeah, my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory take is that um that the people who are advocating for carnivore don't even realize it, but they're just like working for the US government, who their largest agriculture subsidies go to feed crops, to
Mm.
feed mostly beef. And the marketing people who, when I was a kid, did Beef It's What's for Dinner with Sam Elliott, which was just a fantastic commercial, are
Yeah.
now just taking it a step further and going like, we need to sell more beef because we're so heavily subsidizing it. Let's just tell people to only eat beef. And it's just the wildest
Hmm.
thing ever. I don't know why, they're not being called government shills for playing into one of America's biggest industries, but apparently I don't know. That's not entirely sincere, but I think that might be how it's happened, like by accident.
I'm sure there has been some influence in that, and I've heard it all from like more of that like tin hat aspect of big beef, big pharma, big sugar, big name, whatever the heck you want. Um, and so, yes, of course, there's going to be people that have agendas and they're going to be promoting certain things for their own financial gain. Uh, I I think there is some influence, right, with certain demographics, but I try not to stress too much over that. And my mindset and my practice when helping people is why not both? Why
Right.
why do you have to go to such extremes? Why
No,
why
yeah,
can't we
you
kind of live
preach
in harmony?
moderation. Yeah, you preach
Yeah.
moderation really well. That's what I appreciate. Like I also think like it's hard to escape our perspective, right? My perspective was always weight loss. And then I I
Hmm.
I lost weight a bunch of times. I gained weight a bunch of times. I maintained my weight now for a number of years. And now I for sure am more interested in health than weight loss. Like there's only a certain amount of weight I could lose at this point before, when I do lose weight, I get to the point where it's like, oh my God, my body's freaking out and miserable and I'm hungry all the time and I
Hmm.
can't live like that. And so, like,
Yeah.
finding my kind of equilibrium has been important and I've basically found it. And like, yeah, okay, if I got a job and I want to get a little lean, I'll be kind of grumpy for a while and I'm okay with that. Or I want to take
Yeah.
a picture with my shirt off. I'm going to diet for that. And then I know
Sure.
like those 5 pounds or 10 pounds are coming back and that's fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and it's not a long-term thing, right? It's
no,
not a forever thing.
exactly. And the flip side is though now I am more interested in health. So I am looking at things like, are there supplements I should take? Because there weren't really for weight loss, but now it's like maybe an omega-3 is going to help my health. Maybe, but that
Hmm.
wasn't my primary driver. So but I will say there were a number of times I was pulled onto a diet or a regimen because I was kind of sold that I needed to have those kind of health improvements in order to lose weight. Does that make sense? Like I can remember one where I was like losing weight fairly fine, and then somebody introduced me to Dr. Gundry, and it was like, oh, you gotta cut out lectins because of
Hmm.
inflammation, and that's slowing your weight loss. And it's like, listen, I get it if you have an autoimmune disease, and that's why you're altering your diet. You're making changes based on a physical condition, but like I think
Hmm.
for the people out there that are trying to lose weight and are selling you that like you're going to have better brain function on keto, it's like, okay, but that has nothing to do with why they started doing keto, which was weight loss. Like let's not
Yeah.
move the finish lines for these people. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, trying to go down like an unnecessary rabbit hole, basically.
Right. And if weight loss is your primary driver, and you're suddenly going to be eating in a way where it's like, well, I can only do this for 30, 60, 90 days because this is
Hmm.
such a departure from how I could possibly live my life forever. I don't know. I really do think like find some structure that's like a forever structure that's also
Hmm.
amenable to weight loss, but focus on the structure. Like if you're doing keto for 30 days and expecting that that's going to be a permanent solution to your weight, like I don't know if you're going to be happy with it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know about you, but like doing something like that for the rest of my life sounds absolutely miserable
No, I
because
couldn't do it.
I like cake, I like cookies, I like, rice and potatoes, my one of my favorites.
Yeah,
So, it's another saying that I really, really like is from Stan Efferding. I'm not sure if you know of him, but he always coins the term compliance is the science.
right.
And so that the best diet is the one that you can stick to. Um,
I'm a big fan of
and
his mash. The mash he
I
makes,
haven't
like
had it.
It's so great. I mean, look, that's another thing where where I think he probably eats it quite a bit more than I do. But when I make
Yeah.
it, it's easy meal prep and it's got
Mhm.
everything in it. And you're not like you don't have to set. You just got one bowl. There you go. There's your meal. It's got everything you
Mhm.
need. It's great.
Yeah, he gives some really sound advice, and there he has kind of a method that works for him and a lot of his people that he works with, and it's nothing crazy. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah, he's awesome. And he's also a total badass.
yeah, yeah.
You know, an animal.
So I have a question for you, actually.
Hit me.
Um, what what works for you like now? What are you finding with like, going through all of your kind of paths in the past? What have you found to be most successful for you when it comes to like your nutrition and fitness?
Staying away from processed foods as much as possible. And I say that with the caveat that if I'm eating processed foods, I'm trying to eat something that is like a high protein processed food, like
Mhm.
a low fat beef stick. If I'm gonna get a beef stick, that I do consider a processed food, but I'll get like, Chomps
Mhm.
makes a turkey stick that's not swimming in fat. I
Yeah.
like these Maui Nui venison sticks. You're only getting 6 grams of protein, but it's only 60 calories. So it's not, you're not overwhelmed, like a Slim Jim. I'm never going to eat a Slim Jim
Hmm.
today. That's just off
Yeah.
the, and occasionally I'll eat, there's a company called Legendary Foods, which makes these Pop Tarts that are high protein Pop
Yeah.
Tarts. I don't want to eat that every day, but that's like as processed as I get. Um,
Hmm.
for the most part, I'm eating foods that have one word ingredients: chicken, rice, potato, broccoli. And if I'm eating something that's got lots of ingredients, it's going to be a mash made of one word ingredients or a salad,
Yeah.
something like that. Um, and then I still have to, well, for a couple of years when I was like first figuring out maintenance, I was really diligent with writing down, doing all the math for staying within a caloric window. I don't do that at all ever anymore. Um, but I did spend years doing it so I can kind of eyeball what
Hmm.
an appropriate meal is. And I will say that I I spent so many years um blowing past any kind of satiety markers that my or signals that my body was registering. I don't know, maybe I didn't have them, but like it got to the point where eating for me to the point of I don't you can't even use the word satiety because it was like I wanted to feel
Hmm.
full. I wanted, I wanted to like the idea of eating a good meal would be like you got to go lay on the couch. Like you're so full, you're
Yeah.
incapacitated. So
Like Thanksgiving post meal.
yes, I don't do
Yeah.
that anymore. In fact, even on Thanksgiving, I don't do that anymore. Like that for me is that there are some, I'm also sober and sobriety is works well for me. Abstinence works well for me, but you can't
Hmm.
be abstinent from food. You have to eat. And so I need other guardrails that I treat in a similar way. Um, so I very much don't eat desserts. If I do, I'm gonna have like a thing of Halo Top, which is
Yeah.
330 calories on average.
Hmm.
Um, and even that, I when I first discovered those, that got out of hand. I started eating those every night, and I very soon went like, well, 60 grams of carbohydrates right before bed every single night is not a good
Hmm.
idea. I have to put the brakes on this. This is like a once a month thing for me now. Or like I got to give up rice at one of my meals or two of my meals or something like that. But it's not just a freebie. So there's lots of like things I do, but I do really try. I feel I've heard some people who have kind of these ideas about how we solve the obesity crisis in America talk about like just ending processed foods with a big target, creating a target out of high fructose corn syrup, corn stuff, and sugar, and they're very anti that stuff. And I don't consume a lot of that. I mean, I almost never consume that. If I'm working out really hard, I might drink a Gatorade at the gym,
Hmm.
but I can't tell you the last time I did that. It's probably been a year since I've done that. So I guess
Yeah.
I'm not working out that hard. But I don't know that that solves the crisis, because when I was younger, one of the diets I tried was just like, I think it was a blood type diet. So the blood type diet eliminated processed foods, and it limited food even more drastically than just processed foods. But there are no, or what's another one I did for the yeast in your blood, candida. That also eliminates processed foods. I think I initially lost weight on both of those diets, but then long term, I started to put weight back on because I can eat a lot of food. Like
Yeah.
you put chicken and broccoli and rice and olive oil in front of me, I'll eat 3 plates of that. Now, you
Hmm.
take the olive oil out, or you make me measure the olive oil, and the amount that I can consume comes down real small. I cannot eat just dry pasta. I can't do it. And good
Yeah.
pasta sauce has a lot of fat in it. So, like, that's out too. I can't, if you just did crushed tomatoes and garlic, I don't know how much of that I'm getting through. But if you give me Parmesan cheese, I'm in. I'll eat a gigantic bowl of it.
Game
And
on.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. And so the same thing with like keto and stuff. I'm a savory guy. You tell me I can eat ribeye steaks and that's it. I'll overeat ribeye steaks. I will
Hmm.
way overdo that. Um, and so I'm more focused on being honest about fats, because I think I spent so long demonizing carbohydrates that like it's completely innate. It's like I'm scared of carbohydrates in my core, because I believed at one point that they were the
Hmm.
cause of me being overweight. Um, when I started eating them again, I realized very quickly that I had a hard time overeating carbohydrates without fat. And so those are the two things I've really like thinking about, like fat and carbs. Protein is pretty much free, but I recognize that all my protein sources, for the most part, shrimp is very, very low in fat. White fish is very, very low in fat. So I'm not thinking about fat at all in that. And I'm not even thinking about fat when I'm eating a chicken breast that doesn't have skin on it. But I
Hmm.
know I'm getting some fat. Was that just way too long and complicated?
No, not at all. Not at all. It was very insightful. You made a lot of awesome points that I speak about with people all of the time, just helping them with their own nutrition, and then also there's a lot of similarities to kind of how I operate too.
Yeah, those one word ingredients, while not allowing the fats to flow freely, like broccoli, I can't overeat broccoli. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Olive oil, I will overeat, so I have to be
Hmm.
careful of that. Rice, I probably could overeat a certain types of rice. So
Hmm.
I measure that to a degree. Like I can eyeball about a cup of rice, and I'm not
Hmm.
really having more than that at any meal. And if I'm like feeling really frisky and I'm going to throw a little, toasted sesame oil, which is another thing that's being demonized because it's a seed oil. Sorry, I'll occasionally eat toasted sesame oil.
Yeah.
It's going to be a few drops. You know what I mean? It will
Hmm.
not get out of hand, because I know it can get out of hand so quickly.
Sure. Yeah. And it just always goes back to that the dose makes the poison, right?
Right.
It's you can overdo it on any foods. You can do over overdo it on really anything, and it's likely not to be going to be healthy for you. Same thing with like exercise. You take a look at like these extreme sports and like high level athletes, it's not necessarily health promoting.
Right.
They're beating their bodies into the ground to perform at their absolute best and be at the highest level too.
Yeah, my 18-year-old daughter really likes lifting weights and is always so disappointed that I have no idea what my one lift maxes are on anything.
Yeah.
I just have no idea. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
well, I pretty much work out with 225 to 250 on the bench press. Like that's what I know I can lift that. And she's like, but
Mhm.
that's all you can lift. And I'm like, no, I could probably do more. I'm doing that 12 times at least every
Yeah.
set. And she's like, I mean, it like hurts her in her soul. And I say to her, like, I'm almost 50 years old. You're 18. Like, I don't need to know what my one, well, who
Yeah.
cares? I'm strong
Who are
enough.
you trying to prove?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
It's wild. I mean, I get it if you're like, there's some people she lifts weights with and they're teenagers and they're really into strength and that's awesome and like even Stan
Hmm.
Efferding, but I look at Stan Efferding and I'm like, you're a fucking mutant, dude.
Yeah.
This is a whole other thing and that's his life. My life is not lifting weights, you know. It's
Sure.
not. My life is more revolves more around fat loss than it does about building muscle or strength,
Hmm.
you know.
Well, even though you're more focused on fat loss, you got a good amount of muscle on you. I've seen pictures and highlights before, and
Well,
you
and
build a awesome physique.
thank you. And that's the other thing is I go like I'm not going to be a bodybuilder. I'm not a bodybuilder. Well, I don't I don't really care about like, you know, there's no
Hmm.
thing inside me saying lift heavier. It's just not in me. Um,
Hmm.
I don't care enough to tell my 18-year-old kid some number. Like I'm not going to go do that for her. So like
Yeah.
what that's the other thing is like I think I had to get really real with my priorities, which were I don't want to lose muscle. I want to preserve it. And you know, when you really look at the science in muscle preservation, it's not a lot of work. It's you don't have to
Yeah.
kill yourself in the gym at all.
Yeah, there's some really cool research out there saying like, the amount of total volume it takes to build muscle, it's a third of that at like the lowest, if not more, a sixth or a seventh, or even in older like elderly populations, like a ninth. So again, it doesn't take much.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. If but yeah, the build that's what kind of got me to kind of change gears because I was working out for a while with this like I gotta get the 4 pounds of muscle per year that I can get.
Hmm.
And then I was like, who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand if you if you've been deteriorating for a long time, then maybe like those 4 pounds are
Hmm.
super vital. I don't need those 4 pounds. I really
Yeah,
don't.
you're
I'm a
you're strong
big
enough.
fucking dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. If
and
you're benching 225 for sets of 12, you're doing a-okay.
it's totally fine. Yeah, exactly. That was
Yeah.
my attitude too. And she's like, this kid, he's 18, he benched 405 for two. And I'm like, good for him. He's 18. What do I
Yeah.
care? You know? Um, Gerald, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it. And I love following you on Instagram. Thank you.
I really, really appreciate it. It's been an honor chatting with you for this last hour. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, talk soon.